Now let's begin. Calvin Walters stood in the garage of his modest craftsman home, checking the oil in his 2015 Honda Accord. The morning sun filtered through the dusty window, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. His hands, stained with engine grease, moved with practiced efficiency, a skill he'd picked up from necessity rather than passion. Being a single father to an 8-year-old meant learning to do everything himself. "Dad, I can't find my permission slip." Ethan's voice echoed from inside the house, high-pitched with panic. Calvin wiped his hands on an old rag and headed inside. He found his son tearing through the kitchen drawers, his mop of dark hair falling into his eyes. The kid looked just like Clara had at that age. At least, that's what Mildred Nichols kept telling him during her increasingly frequent visits. Calvin tried not to think about his wife too often. 3 years had passed since she'd walked out, leaving nothing but a note saying she couldn't do this anymore. No explanation. No forwarding address. Just gone. "Check your backpack's front pocket," Calvin said, ruffling Ethan's hair. "Where I told you to put it last night." Ethan unzipped the pocket and pulled out the crumpled yellow form. "Oh, thanks, Dad." Calvin had been working as a freelance logistics consultant since Clara left, a fancy title for someone who helped small businesses optimize their supply chains and shipping routes. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and let him work from home, which meant being there when Ethan got off the school bus. Before Clara's disappearance, Calvin had been climbing the corporate ladder at a major freight company, traveling constantly, missing baseball games and parent-teacher conferences. Now, he wouldn't trade his flexible schedule for anything. The irony wasn't lost on him. Clara had left because she felt alone, trapped at home while he chased promotions. Now he was the one at home, alone, raising their son. "You excited about the Grand Canyon?" Calvin asked, pouring orange juice into Ethan's favorite dinosaur cup. "So excited." Ethan bounced in his seat. "Mr. Harrison said we might see California condors. They have 10-foot wingspans, Dad." 10 feet. Calvin smiled despite the knot in his stomach. This would be Ethan's first time on a plane without him. The 5th-grade field trip was a 3-day educational excursion to Arizona, something Pinewood Elementary had been doing for 20 years. Calvin had gone on the same trip when he was Ethan's age. Still, the thought of his son flying across the country made his chest tight. "Remember the rules," Calvin said. "Stay with your buddy, listen to the chaperones, and call me when you land." "I know, Dad. You've told me like 100 times." They drove to school in comfortable silence, Ethan absorbed in a library book about raptors. Calvin pulled into the drop-off lane and watched the other parents hugging their kids goodbye. Some looked excited, others worried. Calvin spotted Brittany Berg, whose daughter Zoe was also going on the trip. She waved from her minivan. "Love you, buddy," Calvin said, pulling Ethan into a hug. "Be safe." "Love you too, Dad. Don't worry so much." Calvin watched Ethan disappear into the crowd of students gathering near the buses that would take them to the airport. His phone buzzed, a text from Mildred Nichols. "Hope you're not worrying yourself sick. Ethan will be fine. Clara would want him to have these experiences." He stared at the message, jaw clenched. Mildred always did that, invoking Clara's name like she had any right to speak for a woman who'd abandoned her own child. The woman had been hovering more than usual lately, showing up unannounced with casseroles and unsolicited parenting advice. She'd even suggested taking Ethan for a weekend soon. "To give you a break." Calvin had politely declined. Something about her intensity made him uncomfortable. The rest of the day crawled by. Calvin tried to focus on work, reviewing shipping manifests for a client in Portland, but his mind kept drifting to Ethan. He checked his phone obsessively, waiting for the text that the plane had taken off safely. It arrived at 11:47 a.m., all students aboard and accounted for. Taking off in 15 minutes. Mrs. Patterson, chaperone. Calvin exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. He spent the afternoon finishing the Portland project, then started dinner prep. By 6 p.m., Ethan should have landed in Phoenix and called from the hotel. Calvin had made him promise twice. 6:15 p.m. No call. 6:30 p.m. Nothing. At 6:45 p.m., Calvin called Ethan's cheap flip phone. It went straight to voicemail. He told himself not to panic. Maybe the phone was dead. Maybe they'd gone straight to dinner. At 7 p.m., his phone rang with an unknown number. He answered immediately. "Mr. Walters? This is Captain Wayne Gwynn from Pacific West Airlines. Flight 2847 to Phoenix. Calvin's heart stopped. Is everything okay? Is my son? Your son is fine, sir. That is, I hope he's fine. I'm calling because this is unusual, but I needed to speak with you directly. Your son wasn't on my flight manifest. The words didn't make sense. What? No, the school sent me a confirmation. He got on the bus this morning. I understand, sir. But according to our records, his seat was canceled yesterday evening. A woman called our customer service line claiming to be Clara Walters, your wife. She said there was a family emergency and Ethan wouldn't be traveling. Calvin gripped the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. My wife left 3 years ago. I don't know where she is. There was a pause. Sir, I thought that might be the case. The call came from a Mildred Nichols phone number. I checked. And there's something else you need to know. What? I requested security footage from Seattle-Tacoma Airport after we took off, and I noticed the discrepancy. I wanted to make sure one of my passengers wasn't missing. The footage shows someone did pick up a child matching Ethan's description from the school group around 9:30 a.m. before they boarded. The person signed him out, and the chaperone somehow didn't notice he was missing until we were airborne. Calvin's blood ran cold. Who took my son? Mr. Walters, I'm sending you the security footage now. You need to see this for yourself. And sir, you need to call the police. Immediately, Calvin's laptop chimed with an incoming email. He opened it with shaking hands, clicked the video file. The footage was grainy but clear enough. He watched Ethan's group enter the terminal, saw the chaperones organizing them near the gate. Then a woman approached. She was tall, blonde, wearing sunglasses and a blue jacket. She spoke to Ethan, who seemed confused at first, then nodded. They walked away together, her hand on his shoulder. The woman looked back once, directly at the camera, and pushed her sunglasses up to rest on her head. Calvin's entire world shattered. The face staring back at him from the screen was impossible. It couldn't be. She was gone. She'd left. She'd been gone for 3 years. But there was no mistaking those features, that specific way she held her head, the small scar above her right eyebrow from a childhood bike accident. Clara Walters, his wife, the woman who disappeared without a trace, had just kidnapped their son. Calvin didn't remember calling 911. He didn't remember the police arriving, or giving his statement, or showing them the video. Everything blurred together in a haze of shock and rage. 2 officers sat in his living room, Detective Scotty Lang, a weathered man in his 50s, and his younger partner, Officer Jeanette Daniel. Mr. Walters, I need you to focus, Detective Lang said, his voice gentle but firm. When was the last time you had contact with your wife? Calvin rubbed his face. June 14th, 3 years ago. She left a note on the kitchen table. Said she couldn't do this anymore, that she needed to find herself. I thought she'd come back. When she didn't, I filed a missing persons report. And that investigation went nowhere. Her phone was disconnected. Her bank account was emptied. She'd withdrawn $15,000 the day before. No credit card activity. No trail. It was like she vanished. Calvin's voice cracked. I hired a private investigator. He found nothing. Eventually, I had to accept she was gone. Officer Daniel leaned forward. What about Mildred Nichols, your mother-in-law? What's your relationship with her? Strained. She blamed me for Clara leaving. Said I worked too much, wasn't attentive enough. She's been coming around more lately, wanting to spend time with Ethan. Calvin's eyes widened. She knew. She had to have known Clara was alive. Detective Lang nodded. We're bringing her in for questioning now. Mr. Walters, I need to ask, was there any custody dispute? Any reason Clara would feel she couldn't see her son through legal channels? No. When she left, she left. No divorce papers, no custody arrangements, nothing. Legally, we're still married. She abandoned us. The detective exchanged a glance with his partner. We've issued an Amber Alert. Clara's information, Ethan's description, everything. We're also checking traffic cameras, credit cards, and phone records for both Clara and Mildred. We'll find your son, Mr. Walters. But Calvin barely heard him. His mind was racing, cycling through 3 years of questions that suddenly had a terrifying new context. Clara hadn't just left on a whim. This was planned. She'd waited, bided her time, gotten Mildred to help her. But why now? Why take Ethan this way? After the police left, Calvin sat in the dark living room, staring at Ethan's school photo on the mantel. 8 years old, missing his 2 front teeth, grinning at the camera. His son was out there somewhere with a woman who was essentially a stranger to him. Ethan barely remembered his mother. He'd been 5 when she left. Calvin's phone rang again. Unknown number. Hello. Calvin. The voice sent ice through his veins. 3 years, but he'd never forget that voice. Clara. Where's he? Where's Ethan? He's safe. He's with his mother, where he belongs. Her voice was different, harder, colder. You had no right to keep him from me. Keep him from you. You left. You abandoned us. I had my reasons. Reasons you'd never understand. But I've spent 3 years getting clean, getting stable, building a life. A life I want to share with my son. Calvin's hands shook. Getting clean? Clara, what are you talking about? She laughed, bitter and sharp. Oh, Calvin. You were always so blind, so wrapped up in your precious career. You never noticed, did you? The pills, the drinking, the depression. I was drowning, and you didn't even see me going under. So you ran? You disappeared instead of getting help, instead of talking to me. There's no talking to you. There never was. You're like my mother, all judgment, no understanding. But I'm better now. I'm sober, I have a job, a home. I can give Ethan the life he deserves. By kidnapping him, Calvin was shouting now. The police are looking for you, Clara. This is felony kidnapping. He's my son. You can't kidnap your own child. You can when you've been gone for 3 years. You have no custody rights. No legal standing. Bring him back now, and maybe we can work something out. But if you don't, you'll what? Have me arrested? Think about what that would do to Ethan, Calvin. Think about how it would feel for him to watch his mother being dragged away in handcuffs. Calvin forced himself to breathe, to think. She was right about one thing. Ethan's well-being had to come first. Let me talk to him. I need to know he's okay. Silence. Then, he's sleeping. He had a big day. But I'll let you talk to him tomorrow. I'm not a monster, Calvin. I love our son. If you love him, bring him home. I am taking him home. My home. Goodbye, Calvin. Don't bother trying to trace this call. I'm not stupid. The line went dead. Calvin immediately called Detective Lang, relayed the conversation word for word. The detective promised to contact the FBI. Kidnapping across state lines made it a federal case now. They'd trace Clara's phone, track her movements, find her. But Calvin knew his wife. Or he thought he had, once upon a time. She was smart, calculating. If she'd planned this for 3 years, she wouldn't be easy to find. He pulled up his laptop and started searching. Clara Nichols. Clara Walters. He ran through social media, employment databases, property records. Nothing. She was a ghost. Then he remembered something. Clara's college roommate, Rosetta Whitehead, had been her best friend. If anyone might know where Clara had been, it would be her. Calvin found Rosetta's Facebook profile, still active, living in Sacramento. He sent a message explaining the situation, begging for help. The reply came within minutes. Call me. Now. Calvin dialed the number she provided. Calvin, I'm so sorry, Rosetta said immediately. I wanted to tell you, but Clara made me promise. She said you'd try to take Ethan away if you knew. Knew what? Where is she? Last I heard, she was living in Reno. She's been working at a casino, dealing blackjack. Calvin, she's with someone. A guy named Buck Ochoa. He's bad news. Really bad news. Calvin's stomach dropped. What do you mean? He's got a record. Assault, fraud, drug charges. Clara met him in rehab 2 years ago. I tried to warn her, but she wouldn't listen. She said he understood her, that he was helping her stay clean. But Calvin, I think he's the one who convinced her to take Ethan. He's been pushing her to get what's rightfully hers. His words. Do you have an address? Rosetta hesitated. If I give this to you, promise me you'll be careful. Buck is dangerous. Don't go alone. I promise. Please, Rosetta. He's my son. She gave him an address in Reno, Nevada. An apartment complex called Desert Winds on the east side of the city. Calvin hung up and stared at the address. The police would tell him to wait, to let them handle it. The FBI would coordinate with local authorities, organize a careful extraction. But that could take days. And every hour Ethan was with Clara, and this Buck person was another hour his son was in danger. Calvin made a decision. He packed a bag, grabbed his passport, just in case they ran, and pulled up a map. Reno was a 12-hour drive from Seattle. He could be there by morning. He texted Detective Lang the information Rosetta had provided, told him he was going to Reno, but would wait for police backup. It was a lie. Calvin was done waiting. His son was out there, scared and confused, with a mother he barely knew and a criminal Calvin had never met. Calvin Walters had spent 3 years learning to live without his wife. He'd become self-sufficient, resourceful, and above all, protective of his son. He'd missed Ethan's first day of kindergarten once because of a business trip. He'd never miss a moment that mattered again. As he pulled out of his driveway at midnight, Calvin made a vow. He would find Ethan. He would bring him home. And Clara, whoever she'd become in these 3 years, would learn that there were consequences for abandoning a child and then taking him back. The Honda's engine hummed as Calvin merged onto I-5 South, beginning the long drive toward Nevada and whatever waited for him there. His phone buzzed with calls from Detective Lang. He ignored them. This was between him and Clara now. He'd given her everything once. His love, his trust, his future. She'd thrown it away. But she wouldn't take his son. Not while Calvin still had breath in his lungs and fight in his heart. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly under the mid-morning sun, heat waves shimmering off the asphalt. Calvin had driven through the night, stopping only once for gas and coffee in Sacramento. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but adrenaline kept him sharp. The address Rosetta had given him was programmed into his GPS, Desert Winds Apartments, Unit 2847, Reno. He'd spent the drive formulating a plan. Bursting in would be stupid, Buck Ochoa was dangerous, and if Clara felt cornered, there was no telling what she might do. Calvin needed to be smart about this. He needed leverage. Around 10 a.m., he pulled into a parking spot 3 buildings down from Unit 2847. The complex was run down, paint peeling, with broken playground equipment scattered in the central courtyard. Calvin watched the apartment from his car. 3rd floor, corner unit. The windows had cheap curtains drawn tight. His phone had 17 missed calls from Detective Lang and 3 from Officer Daniel. There was also a text from Lang, "Do not engage. FBI en route to Reno. ETA 3 hours. Wait for us." 3 hours. Calvin checked his watch. He'd wait, but not in the car. He needed to get closer, to see if Ethan was actually there. He grabbed his phone and a baseball cap, pulled it low over his eyes, and walked toward the building like he belonged there. The front door security buzzer was broken, hanging by wires. Calvin slipped inside and took the stairs to the 3rd floor. Unit 2847 was at the end of the hall. Calvin pressed his ear to the door. Voices inside. A man's, deep, argumentative. And Clara's, sharp and defensive. "Not your decision, Buck. He's my son. And whose idea was this whole thing? Who planned it? Who made it happen? You owe me, Clara. I don't owe you anything. We agreed. We agreed you'd get the kid, and we'd figure out the next step together. That next step is getting out of here. Mexico, like we talked about." Calvin's blood boiled. Mexico. They were planning to take Ethan out of the country. Then, another voice. Small, scared. "Mom, I want to go home. I want my dad." Calvin's knees nearly buckled. Ethan. He was alive, he was there. "Sweetie, this is your home now. With me. You'll see, it'll be better. We'll have so much fun together. But Dad said I'm supposed to call him when I land. He's probably worried. Your dad will be fine. He has his work. He doesn't need you like I do." Calvin's hands clenched into fists. He wanted to break down that door, to grab his son and run. But Buck was in there, and Calvin had no weapon, no backup, no plan beyond getting Ethan out safely. He backed away from the door and returned to the stairwell, pulling out his phone. He called Detective Lang. "Where are you?" Lang demanded immediately. "Reno. Desert Winds Apartments. They're here, all 3 of them. But Detective, they're planning to run. To Mexico. You need to get here now. God damn it, Walters. I told you to wait. You could have compromised the entire." I heard my son's voice. "He's scared, and he wants to come home. How long until you get here?" A pause. 45 minutes. "We've been coordinating with Reno PD. Do not, I repeat, do not approach that apartment. You understand me." 45 minutes, Calvin repeated. He hung up. 45 minutes was too long. What if they ran? What if they left before the police arrived? Calvin descended to the 1st floor and circled the building. Unit 2847's windows faced the parking lot. A rusted fire escape clung to the side of the building. Calvin tested the ladder. It groaned, but held. This was insane. He wasn't some action hero. He was a logistics consultant who'd barely been in a fistfight since high school. But none of that mattered. Ethan was up there, frightened, with people who planned to take him to another country. Calvin climbed. The fire escape creaked with every step, metal flaking off under his hands. He reached the third floor and peered through the window. The curtain gap showed a narrow view into a cluttered living room. Clara sat on a worn couch, Ethan beside her. The boy looked small, vulnerable, clutching a backpack with his school's logo. Buck Ochoa paced in front of them, a thick-necked man with tattoos crawling up his arms, his face twisted in irritation. "We leave in an hour," Buck was saying. "Pack light. Just essentials." "An hour?" Clara looked panicked. "Buck, we can't just. We can and we will. The cops know about this place. It's only a matter of time before they show up. Your buddy Rosetta probably ratted us out." "Rosetta wouldn't. She would and she did. I know her type. Self-righteous, thinks she knows what's best for everyone." Buck grabbed a duffel bag from the closet. "Get moving." Calvin's mind raced. If they left, tracking them would be nearly impossible. He had to stall them, had to keep them here until the police arrived. He checked his phone. 38 minutes. He tried the window. Locked. Of course it was locked. Then he had an idea. It was risky, possibly stupid, but it might work. Calvin climbed down the fire escape to the second floor and found a window to an unoccupied unit. The glass was dirty, the lock broken. He slid it open, slipped inside an empty apartment that smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. In the kitchen, he found what he needed. An old toolbox left behind by maintenance workers. Inside, a wrench, some screwdrivers, and a roll of duct tape. Calvin grabbed the wrench and returned to the third-floor fire escape. He positioned himself outside Unit 2847's window and, with one hard swing, smashed the glass. The sound was explosive. Clara screamed. Buck shouted obscenities. Calvin dove to the side, pressing himself against the wall as Buck appeared at the broken window, looking out wildly. What the hell? Buck scanned the parking lot, the fire escape. Calvin held his breath, not moving. Probably kids, Clara said from inside. This neighborhood. We're leaving now, Buck said. Forget packing. Grab the kid and let's go. No, Calvin couldn't let that happen. He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. This is Calvin Walters. I'm at Desert Winds Apartments, Unit 2847. There's a domestic disturbance in progress. I can hear a woman screaming, a child crying. Please send officers immediately. He hung up before they could respond. Local cops would arrive faster than the FBI. Then Calvin did something that surprised even himself. He climbed back through the broken window into Unit 2847. He landed in a small bedroom, the glass crunching under his shoes. Buck heard it immediately. Stay here, Buck told Clara, and Calvin heard heavy footsteps approaching. Calvin grabbed the wrench from his pocket just as Buck burst through the bedroom door. For a split second, they stared at each other. Buck's eyes widened in recognition. Clara must have shown him photos. Then his face twisted with rage. You, Buck snarled. Me, Calvin agreed. Buck lunged. Calvin swung the wrench, catching Buck's arm with a solid thunk. Buck roared in pain, but didn't stop. He was bigger, stronger, fueled by fury. He grabbed Calvin by the shirt and slammed him against the wall. You shouldn't have come here, Buck growled. Calvin brought his knee up hard into Buck's stomach. The man grunted, loosening his grip. Calvin twisted free and brought the wrench down again, this time on Buck's shoulder. Buck stumbled back. Dad, Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. Calvin looked toward the doorway. Ethan stood there, Clara behind him, both staring in shock. Ethan, get back, Clara shouted. But Ethan didn't move. He was looking at his father with wide eyes. Dad, you came. Of course I came, buddy. I'll always come for you. Buck recovered, charging at Calvin with a wild haymaker. Calvin ducked, but not fast enough. The punch caught his jaw, sending stars exploding across his vision. He fell to the floor, the wrench clattering from his grip. Buck stood over him, breathing hard, reaching into his waistband. Calvin's blood ran cold when he saw the gun. You made a big mistake, Buck said, leveling the weapon at Calvin's chest. No, Clara said firmly. Buck, put it down. No guns. That wasn't part of the plan. Plans change, babe. This guy's not leaving here alive. He'll tell the cops everything. I already did. Calvin gasped, tasting blood. They're on their way. You've got maybe 5 minutes before this place is surrounded. Buck's eyes darted to the window, then back to Calvin. Then I guess I better make this quick. Clara stepped forward, putting herself between Buck and Calvin. I said no. This isn't who we are. This isn't. Move, Clara. No. Ethan was crying now, pressing himself against the wall. Calvin's heart broke watching his son's terror. This was his fault. He should have waited for the police. He should have let them handle it. His need to be the hero had put Ethan in even more danger. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Buck's hand trembled on the gun. Damn it. Damn it. He lowered the weapon and grabbed the duffel bag. I'm gone. You two do what you want. He shoved past Clara, past Calvin, and ran for the door. They heard his footsteps pounding down the stairs. Clara stood frozen, staring at Calvin on the floor, then at Ethan crying against the wall. Clara, Calvin said softly, struggling to his feet. It's over. Let him come home. Tears streamed down her face. I just wanted my son back. I wanted to be his mother again. Then be his mother. But the right way. Through the courts, through counseling. Not like this. The sirens were deafening now, right outside the building. Car doors slammed. Boots thundered on the stairs. Clara looked at Ethan. Baby, I'm so sorry. I thought I was doing the right thing. Mom, you scared me, Ethan sobbed. I know, and I'm sorry. The door burst open. 3 Reno police officers entered, guns drawn, shouting commands. Clara raised her hands immediately. Calvin did the same, showing he was unarmed. Ethan Walters, one officer called. Here, Ethan whispered. An officer holstered her weapon and moved to Ethan, kneeling beside him. You're safe now, sweetheart. Everything's going to be okay. Detective Lang appeared in the doorway moments later, his face red with fury and relief. Calvin Walters, you are the most reckless, stubborn, idiotic. Is my son okay? Calvin interrupted. Lang's expression softened slightly. He will be. The Reno Police Department's interview room was small, windowless, and painted an institutional beige that made Calvin's headache worse. He'd refused medical treatment for his split lip and bruised jaw. Ethan needed him coherent, not sedated on painkillers. Detective Lang sat across from him, a female FBI agent named Katrina Horn at his side. They'd been questioning him for an hour, and Calvin could feel their patience wearing thin. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Agent Horn said, her voice dripping with professional frustration. Despite explicit instructions to wait for law enforcement, you drove 12 hours to Nevada, conducted your own surveillance, climbed a fire escape, broke into a suspect's apartment, and engaged in physical combat with an armed felon. Yes, Calvin said simply. Do you have any idea how many laws you broke? How badly this could have gone? That man had a gun, Mr. Walters. He could have killed you and your son. But he didn't. Through sheer dumb luck. Lang interjected. Buck Ochoa has a rap sheet longer than my arm. Assault with a deadly weapon, armed robbery, drug trafficking. You're lucky to be alive. Calvin leaned forward. With all due respect, Detective, I don't care about my luck. I care about my son. Where is he? Agent Horn's expression softened slightly. He's with Child Protective Services in a room down the hall. He's physically unharmed, though he's shaken up. We'll need to arrange for him to speak with a child psychologist before you can take him home. Can I see him? Soon. We need to finish processing your statement first. She pulled out a file. Buck Ochoa fled the scene and is currently at large. We've issued a warrant and have officers canvassing the area. Clara Nichols Walters is in custody, cooperating fully. She's expressed remorse and claims the kidnapping was her idea, not Ochoa's. Calvin shook his head. She's protecting him. Ethan's friend Rosetta told me Buck convinced Clara to take Ethan. This was his plan. We'll get to the bottom of it, Agent Horn assured him. Now, about Mildred Nichols. Detective Lang pulled out his own file. We arrested her this morning at her home in Seattle. She admitted to making the call to the airline, canceling Ethan's seat. She claimed she did it because Clara asked her to, that she believed Clara had changed and deserved another chance with her son. Calvin's laugh was bitter. Mildred never believed Clara needed to change. She always thought Clara was perfect, and I was the problem. She's being charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping and child endangerment, Lang continued. The DA is pushing for significant prison time. Good, Calvin thought, but he didn't say it out loud. He just wanted this over. He wanted to take Ethan home. Agent Horn closed her file. Mr. Walters, I need to be clear about something. What you did today was dangerous and illegal. You tampered with a federal investigation. However, she paused, choosing her words carefully. You also provided crucial intelligence that led to your son's safe recovery. Under the circumstances, we're not planning to press charges against you. How generous, Calvin muttered. Don't push it, Lang warned. You're getting a pass because your son is safe, and because charging you would make this case even more of a media circus than it already is. But if you ever pull something like this again, there won't be an again, Calvin said firmly. I got my son back. That's all I wanted. A knock on the door interrupted them. A young officer poked his head in. Detective? The boy is asking for his father. Calvin stood immediately. I'm done here. Agent Horn nodded. Go. We'll need formal statements later, but for now, go be with your son. Calvin didn't need to be told twice. He followed the officer down a sterile hallway to a room with a two-way mirror and child-friendly posters on the walls. A woman in her 40s, the CPS representative, he assumed, stood outside. Mr. Walters, she said gently, your son is very brave. He's been asking for you nonstop. Can I see him now? Of course. She opened the door, and Calvin's breath caught. Ethan sat in a small chair, still clutching his school backpack, his face blotchy from crying. When he saw Calvin, his expression crumpled. Dad. Calvin crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled his son into his arms. Ethan clung to him, sobbing into his shoulder. Calvin held him tight, one hand cradling the back of his head, whispering reassurances. It's okay, buddy. It's okay. I've got you. You're safe now. I was so scared, Ethan hiccuped. Mom said we were going on an adventure, but then that man was mean, and I didn't understand why we weren't going to the Grand Canyon. And, chill. You don't have to explain. It's over now. Are you hurt? Ethan pulled back, noticing Calvin's swollen jaw and split lip. You're bleeding. Just a scratch. I'm fine. Ethan's eyes filled with tears again. I thought I'd never see you again. That man said. He said you didn't want me anymore. Calvin's heart shattered. He cupped Ethan's face in his hands, looking directly into his son's eyes. Listen to me. That was a lie. The biggest lie anyone could ever tell. I will always want you. You're my son, my whole world. Nothing and no one will ever change that. Do you understand? Ethan nodded, sniffling. I understand. Good. Calvin hugged him again, breathing in the familiar scent of his son's shampoo. Let's go home. The flight back to Seattle 2 days later was surreal. Calvin had arranged for them to fly rather than drive. He was too exhausted, and Ethan had been through enough. They sat in the back row of the plane, Ethan pressed against the window, watching the clouds. Dad, Ethan said quietly. Yeah, buddy. Is Mom going to jail? Calvin had been dreading this question. The child psychologist had advised him to be honest, but age-appropriate. Yes. What she did was wrong, even though she thought she was doing the right thing. Sometimes people we love make bad choices, and there are consequences. I don't want her to go to jail. Calvin put his arm around Ethan's shoulders. I know, buddy, but it's not up to us. Your mom broke the law. She took you without permission, scared a lot of people, and put you in danger. She said she loved me. I believe she does. But love doesn't mean someone always makes good decisions. Your mom has to face what she did. Ethan was quiet for a moment. What about Grandma Mildred? She's in trouble too. Good. Ethan said, surprising Calvin. She lied to everyone. She told Mrs. Patterson I was sick and couldn't go on the trip. I heard her on the phone. She knew Mom was taking me. Calvin's jaw clenched. Mildred had orchestrated this from the start. She'd deceived the school, the airline, everyone. All to give Clara a chance to steal Ethan away. She'll answer for that, Calvin said. When they finally arrived home, Calvin stood in the driveway for a long moment, just looking at his house. It felt different now, safer, more precious. This was their sanctuary, and no one would threaten it again. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings, therapy sessions, and attempts to return to normalcy. Ethan started seeing Dr. Layla Kim, a child psychologist who specialized in family trauma. Calvin joined him for some sessions, learning how to talk about what happened without making Ethan feel guilty or scared. Clara was officially charged with felony kidnapping, child endangerment, and conspiracy. Her lawyer tried to argue that as Ethan's mother, she had a right to time with her son, but the prosecution demolished that defense. She'd abandoned her family for 3 years, planned an elaborate kidnapping with a known criminal, and intended to flee the country. The judge denied bail. Mildred Nichols was charged as an accessory. She was 72 years old, and her lawyer pleaded for leniency based on her age and clean record. The prosecutor was unmoved. She'd conspired to kidnap a child, endangered him, and shown no remorse. She would stand trial. Buck Ochoa was arrested trying to cross into Mexico 3 weeks after the incident. He was extradited back to Nevada to face charges. Calvin testified at his hearing, describing the assault, the gun, the threats. Buck's lawyer tried to paint Calvin as the aggressor, but the evidence was overwhelming. Buck was held without bail. Through it all, Calvin focused on Ethan. They established new routines: breakfast together every morning, homework at the kitchen table, bedtime stories every night. Calvin turned down 3 consulting jobs to spend more time at home. Money was tight, but he didn't care. Ethan needed stability, and Calvin was determined to provide it. One evening, about 6 weeks after the kidnapping, Calvin found Ethan sitting on his bed, holding a photo of Clara. It was from before she'd left, taken at Ethan's 5th birthday party. She was smiling, holding Ethan on her lap, looking like a completely different person. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said without looking up. "Anything. Did you ever love Mom?" Calvin sat beside him on the bed. "Very much. We met in college, got married young. She was funny and smart, and made me want to be a better person. What happened? We grew apart. I worked too much, she felt alone. Instead of fixing it together, we let it break. When she left, I was angry. But over time, I realized we both made mistakes." Ethan traced the photo with his finger. "Do you think she really changed?" "Like she said, I think she tried to change. But change is hard, especially when you're doing it with the wrong people. Buck Ochoa wasn't helping her get better. He was using her. I kind of hate her," Ethan whispered. "Is that bad?" Calvin pulled his son close. "No, it's not bad. You're allowed to feel however you feel. Angry, sad, confused, all of it is okay. But hating her will hurt you more than it hurts her. Trust me on that. I don't know how to stop. You don't have to figure it out today, or tomorrow, maybe not even this year. But eventually, I hope you can find a way to forgive her. Not for her sake, but for yours." Ethan leaned into Calvin, and they sat in comfortable silence, the photo resting between them. The trial began in early November, 5 months after the kidnapping. Calvin had tried to prepare Ethan, but nothing could really ready an 8-year-old for seeing his mother in an orange jumpsuit, sitting beside a defense attorney in a federal courtroom. Calvin sat in the gallery, Ethan beside him. He'd fought to keep Ethan from having to testify, and the prosecution had agreed. They had enough evidence without traumatizing the child further. Clara looked different. Thinner, her hair dull, her eyes hollow. When she saw Ethan, her composure cracked. Tears streamed down her face, and she mouthed, "I'm sorry," across the courtroom. Ethan gripped Calvin's hand, but said nothing. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. They presented evidence of Clara's abandonment, her years of absence, her secret communications with Mildred Nichols. They showed the airline records, the security footage, the recorded phone call Clara had made to Calvin the night of the kidnapping. Clara's attorney argued that she was a mother desperate to reconnect with her son, that she'd made mistakes but hadn't intended to harm anyone. He portrayed Buck Ochoa as the true villain, claiming Clara had been manipulated and coerced. But the prosecution had evidence that contradicted this narrative. Text messages between Clara and Buck showed them planning the kidnapping for months. Clara had researched flights, studied the school's field trip schedule, coordinated with Mildred. This wasn't a spontaneous act of desperation. It was calculated and premeditated. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. Clara's sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. The judge would determine her prison term based on sentencing guidelines and mitigating factors. Mildred Nichols' trial was separate but concurrent. Her defense was even weaker. She'd admitted to her role, and there was no claim of coercion. She'd helped her daughter kidnap her grandson because she believed Calvin was an unfit father. The jury found her guilty in less than an hour. Buck Ochoa didn't go to trial. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he took a plea deal. 20 years in federal prison, eligible for parole after 15. At Clara's sentencing, the prosecutor recommended the maximum, 15 years. Calvin was given the opportunity to speak. He stood at the podium, looking at his wife, his soon-to-be ex-wife. She looked broken, defeated. A part of him felt pity, but a larger part remembered Ethan's tears, his fear, the nightmares he still had. "Your Honor," Calvin began, "I'm not here to demand vengeance. I'm here to ask for justice. Clara Walters didn't just kidnap our son. She abandoned him when he was 5 years old, leaving him to wonder why his mother didn't love him enough to stay. She let him believe he was the reason she left. For 3 years, I watched my son struggle with that pain. And when she decided she wanted him back, she didn't do it through the proper channels. She didn't file for custody, didn't seek counseling or mediation. She conspired with dangerous criminals to steal him from a school trip. She terrified him. She put him in a room with an armed felon who threatened to kill me in front of him. Whatever punishment you decide, it won't undo what Ethan has been through. But it will send a message that children are not possessions to be taken on a whim. They're human beings who deserve stability, safety, and parents who put their needs first. Clara had 3 years to become the mother Ethan deserved. Instead, she chose herself. I hope she uses her time in prison to finally make that change. Calvin sat down. Clara was openly weeping now. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s named Valeria Solomon, reviewed the case files. Ms. Walters, you've caused immeasurable harm to your child and to your family. Your actions were selfish, reckless, and criminal. While I acknowledge your history of addiction and mental health struggles, they do not excuse your choices. I'm sentencing you to 12 years in federal prison, with the possibility of parole after 8 if you demonstrate genuine rehabilitation. Additionally, you will be permanently prohibited from seeking custody or unsupervised visitation with your son. Any future contact will require court approval and professional supervision. I hope you use this time to understand the gravity of what you've done and to become a person your son might someday forgive. The gavel fell. Mildred Nichols received 6 years, with parole eligibility after 4. She collapsed when the sentence was read, sobbing about how she'd only tried to help her daughter. Calvin felt nothing watching her. She'd enabled Clara's worst impulses, had betrayed his trust, had endangered Ethan. She deserved every day of her sentence. 2 years later, Calvin stood in his backyard watching Ethan play basketball with his friend Zoe Berg, the girl who'd been on the Grand Canyon trip Ethan never made. They were 10 now, all lanky limbs and terrible jump shots, laughing as the ball bounced off the rim for the 3rd time in a row. Life had settled into a new rhythm. Ethan still saw Dr. Kim monthly, but the nightmares had mostly stopped. He'd asked about Clara a few times, and Calvin had been honest. She was in prison, serving her sentence, and had written several letters asking for forgiveness. Calvin had saved them for Ethan to read when he was older, when he could make his own decision about whether to respond. Calvin had finalized the divorce 18 months ago. It felt strange, ending a marriage to someone he hadn't seen in years, someone behind bars. But it was necessary. He needed to move forward, and so did Ethan. His consulting business had grown. Word spread about the dad who'd driven across state lines to rescue his son, and somehow that story made clients trust him more. He had more work than he could handle, which meant he could afford to be selective, taking only projects that allowed him to maintain his schedule with Ethan. "Dad," Ethan called. "Come play with us." Calvin smiled and walked onto the makeshift court. Zoe passed him the ball, and he took a shot. It swished through the net. Pure luck, but he'd take it. "Show off," Ethan teased. As the sun set and the kids played, Calvin thought about how far they'd come. The kidnapping had broken something in both of them, but they'd rebuilt. Stronger this time. More careful, but also more grateful for what they had. His phone buzzed. A message from Detective Lang. "Buck Ochoa denied parole. Will serve full 20 years. Thought you'd want to know." Calvin typed back, "Thanks for the update." He slipped the phone back in his pocket and returned his attention to the basketball game. The past was behind them. Clara was where she needed to be, Mildred too, and Buck would never hurt anyone again. Ethan laughed as Zoe stole the ball from him, and the sound filled Calvin with a contentment he'd thought lost forever. They'd survived. They'd overcome. And they'd done it together. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.